Generally yields back. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. I want to thank Chair Bilirakis for calling today's hearing, and to all the FTC Commissioners for being here today. Oversight is a critical part of this committee's job, especially over parts of the government that impact the lives of every American and nearly every industry. With Chevron, Congress needs to aggressively reclaim our authority and stop allowing federal agencies to create laws where they do not exist and force them to follow congressional intent when they do. It's really important. Frankly, honestly, from my perspective, agencies have, and I'm speaking of all agencies, I'm not singling out the FTC, have had minimal accountability to the American people. With Chevron, I think we add some accountability, even though it is in the courts. Since June of 2022, the FTC has been studying the contracting practices of pharmacy benefit managers, PBMs, and their impacts on patients getting access to life-saving drugs they need. I'm in full support of injecting transparency into their operations. In fact, I believe their compensation needs to be decoupled from drug list prices. They do add value, but we need to tighten up the ship. I'm concerned about the market impacts of both consolidation and vertical integration in the PBM market, and find it puzzling that even with all the power PBMs have amassed over the years, they felt the need to create whole new entities called GPOs, or government or group purchasing organizations. As I'm sure you're aware, the Ohio Attorney General recently filed a lawsuit against one of these GPOs and several PBMs, alleging that these entities were engaged in anti-competitive behavior. Very little is known about these GPOs except that they've created new revenue streams for PBMs and insurers that own them. I know that two have been set up offshore in Ireland and Switzerland, and there are indications they did that to take advantage of lower foreign corporate tax rates and privacy laws. Chair Khan, is this something the FTC is examining?
Thanks for the question, Congressman. And on both fronts, yes, as you noted, the FTC has been scrutinizing the pharmacy benefit managers for a couple of years now. We just released an interim report with some of our staff's initial findings, laying out, as you just noted, the significant vertical and horizontal consolidation, as well as the concerns we've heard from independent pharmacies, for example, as well as the risk of potentially inflated prices. We do 2 case studies in the report, specifically on cancer drugs, showing some potentially troubling outcomes there. On GPOs specifically, we've heard concern from doctors in particular that shortages in areas like antibiotics and chemotherapy may be driven in part by the practices of these GPOs. And so a few months ago, in partnership with the FDA, we launched an RFI to collect comments from the public on these GPOs, and we're continuing to review those comments.
Commissioner Holyoke, you want to comment on that? You have any comment, or anybody else have a comment on that subject?
On that subject, certainly, as you may know, I dissented from this morning from approving this report. I don't believe the report is sufficient. I think it lacks economic and empirical evidence. I think it doesn't look at all of the players in the pharmaceutical field. I think it doesn't doesn't look at all at consumer prices and how consumers are impacted. I'm also concerned that there was a very thorough report from 2005. It doesn't attempt to look at that report and describe the changes from the market conditions from that report. It doesn't explain why those changes exist. I think the 2 case studies are not, we don't know if they're representative of the field. It's too early to know. It's not sufficient. It doesn't provide enough evidence to understand what that actually means. Those 2 case studies also talk about reimbursement rates to the PBM-affiliated pharmacies, but don't tie that to actual consumer harm and what's happening with prices. And I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done still on that. And I hope that the Commission can commit to doing that work and providing a fulsome report.
Thank you for that. I have a few seconds, so Chair Khan, how did we lose the United Health Group Change Healthcare case?
So that was one.
The government. It may not have been just exclusively you.
Yeah, it was.
Because you see what happened, right? Subsequently, Change Healthcare was hacked because their security wasn't properly evaluated in this process. And so how did we lose?
So this was a Justice Department effort to block that merger.
Right.
Unfortunately, as you noted, they lost in the D.C. District Court. That was a vertical merger, and the judge ultimately ruled that he didn't think the risks of anti-competitive effects would be resulting, and he thought that some safeguards that the companies had promised they would put in place would be adequate. I do want to just step back and note a broader trend here where we see time and time again, as companies become more dominant, we are seeing how a single data breach or a single hack can have cascading consequences, be it in healthcare, be it for auto dealers. There was just a big hack that rendered auto dealers kind of captive to a single company. So this is a broader trend, and especially for the FTC that oversees both competition and data security, being able to connect the dots here is going to be critical.
Fair enough. And I think in the PBM space and in this type of situation that Congress, in light of Chevron, needs to put some laws in place, potentially, or at least debate them to help us and help you. I yield back